Video, we discussed one of the most disappointing teams in the NBA this season. We discussed the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm Steven Conner, and you're tuning into the Steven Conner Show. Before we get started, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. Also hit that post notification bell so you can get notified whenever I upload a video. Without further ado, let's get started. So, we are currently in the NBA playoffs. We're in the first round. And it's a couple of teams who I thought at the beginning of this year would have made it, who's not in there. The Mavericks being one of those teams, but they ended up trading a generational talent and Luka Doncic, a top 2 player in the NBA, a top 3 at worst. Then to the Los Angeles Lakers. Then the Phoenix Suns, which is a crap show. We'll talk about them another day. But today, I want to talk about a team that I had really high expectations for, really high hopes for this year, and a lot of people did, and I know their fans really did, and that's the Philadelphia 76ers. The Clippers were right not to pay Paul George. I just want to say that. Norman Powell stepped up this year. The 76ers really had an off year this year. It was terrible for them. Their record was 24-58. They finished the year 1-9. Their two best players, arguably, had to be forced to sit out the rest of the year due to injury, which was Joel Embiid and Paul George. And they struggled this whole year with injuries, staying consistent. And when they did play together, they didn't look good. Particularly Paul George, who got paid a boatload of money. They paid Maxey, Embiid, and George. And honestly, the only one I think really deserved all that money was Tyrese Maxey. Because you paid Paul George all this money, and he's not even putting up better stats than Tobias Harris, which is insane. Paul George really regressed. And he was dealing with a lot this year. I'll give him that. He was dealing with an ongoing injury. He had to be shut down for the season. He was dealing with injury. So maybe that was the issue this year. And maybe next year Paul George could bounce back and be better than what he was. But at the end of the day, the 76ers really struggled this year. And their fans are upset. And the 76ers been struggling for a while. They struggled with Ben Simmons. Then they fired Brett Brown because they couldn't get past the second round. And they notoriously hired Doc Rivers, who is infamous for blowing 3-1 leads and not getting his teams to the conference finals, let alone the NBA finals. I still don't understand why they did that. They should have kept Brett Brown if they were going to hire Doc Rivers. I don't understand it. Then they had the James Harden situation. You know, Harden wasn't clutch in the playoffs, and Embiid wasn't clutch in the playoffs, and it showed when they were together. They just didn't meet the moment. Then they went out. They got Paul George. We had all this hype. Oh, we got Maxey. We got Embiid. We got Paul George. And George and Embiid just had a really bad year. Embiid barely did he play 20 games this year? How many games did Embiid play? I don't know how many games, but I don't know if Embiid even cracked 20 this year. And Embiid frustrates me because you know you're injury prone. You know you get hurt easily. You get hurt all the time. Why in the world would you play for Team USA this summer? The Clippers pulled Kawhi from playing from T. Like, bro, you gotta get healthy. You always say, no, don't do this. We need you for the regular season. Why didn't the Sixers pull him from playing for Team USA, telling him, hey, don't do this? And he was apparently hurt when he was playing for Team USA, and that affected him this season. He didn't give his body enough time to recover. They would have been fine without you. They didn't need you, Embiid. It made no sense for him to play that well. Play for Team USA. It made no sense. He hindered himself, and he hindered this season for them by doing that. Tyrese Maxey was the best player by far this year, and Tyrese Maxey isn't a number 1 player. You can't win with Maxey as a number 1. He still has some developing to do. But the fact that he was the number 1 and the best player says a lot between Paul George and Joel Embiid. Paul George wasn't even I think that Jared McCain was better Paul George this year. And Quentin Grimes was balling. Quentin Grimes was balling at the end of this year. And Jared McCain was balling before he got hurt. He looked way better than Paul George did. But the problem with this team was that they had injuries. They had injuries. Jared McCain was balling. He was injured. Joel Embiid injured all year, even though Joel Embiid could have made some strides to try to make sure he was more healthy by not playing for Team USA, but he was injured. At the end of the day, Paul George was injured. Kyle Lowry, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, a lot of other people. They had a lot of injuries on this team. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But what this team ended up doing is they made the right call. They sat Joel down. They sat Paul George down. It made no sense for them to try to go on a run at the end of the year to make it into the play-in and be first-round exits against Cleveland or Boston, because they were not going to beat either one of them. They weren't good enough. They just weren't good enough production-wise. They weren't good enough. And they realized that, and so they shut the season down. And the Sixers are one of the teams. I'm looking forward to the bright side for the Sixers. Next year, Embiid gets healthy. Paul George gets healthy, comes back. You get Quentin Grimes, Tyrese Maxey, Jaden McCain back healthy. And you end up with a top pick. You set yourself up for a top pick this year in the NBA draft. Imagine they get Cooper Flag. Imagine they get Cooper Flag. That would be an interesting team. Do they keep PG? Do they trade PG if they end up getting Cooper Flag? But the one thing I give them credit for this year is they have successfully tanked. It looks like they've successfully tanked, and they might end up getting rewarded by the NBA draft lottery for tanking successfully. However, the fans don't want that, and they shouldn't be here right now. I'm giving them that, but they shouldn't be here right now. They overpaid for Paul George. They overpaid for Joel Embiid. You know Joel Embiid is injury prone. You know he gets injured every year. And you're just wasting your money at this point, paying him all this money just for him to end up getting hurt and for you to be a first-round exit. Or even when he's not hurt, he doesn't show up in the playoffs. So now what? Then you go out and you pay Maxey all that money. That's okay. He deserved the payday. And then Paul George. The Clippers didn't pay Paul George for a reason, and we see why. Because, like I said, Paul George did not show up this year. He didn't show up. He looked awful. And like I said, they made the right decision by tanking. They made the decision by shutting down PG, by shutting down Embiid. Maybe giving them this offseason. Maybe they'll get healthy. Maybe we'll get PG back. But on the bright side for this team, on paper, and with the top 6 pick they're going to end up getting, on paper, this team could make a good run. And they're in the East, so they could make a solid run next year. They could come back and be better next year and be a top 2, top 3 seed in the East next year. It's possible. It really is possible for them. I don't know what to expect from this team moving forward. They can't move off of Embiid, because who's going to want Embiid at this point? You pay him too much money, he's injury prone. Who wants Paul George? He's making too much money, and he couldn't do better than Tobias Harris. But lucky for them, they have Tyrese Maxey, they have Quentin Grimes, they have Jared McCain, and like I said, Jared McCain was hooping before he got hurt, and they have a top 6 pick. You have a whole offseason and you shut down Embiid before the season got to the end of the year. You shut down Embiid, he can get healthy. You shut down Paul George, he can healthy, and possibly they could go on a run next year. But this year was disappointing for the 76ers. This year was disappointing for the fans. You had all this hype coming in. We got Paul George. We got Maxey. We got Embiid. We're going to make a run. We're going to go far this year. We're going to make it to the finals. And then you absolutely do nothing. Like I said, you were decimated from injuries. But even when Paul George was not injured, he still played like a dookie. And when he played, it was terrible. It was terrible. It really was. So like I said, they had the injury bug all year. And you can say that's their out for this year. But the issue once again is if this doesn't work out next year, if this does not work out next year, you can't blow the team up. You can't, because you're paying Embiid too much. He's injury prone. Paul George, you're paying him too much money. He's not good enough for that contract. Nobody's going to want their contracts. So what do you do? So the 76ers done put themselves in a position where we either win a title, or we just waste our money and just let the years go by. You can't. It's no in between with them. It's no, we'll get them next year. It's no, no. You either gotta win the title or or you're done. That's where they're at right now. We've been talking about the process for all this time. All this time we've been talking about the process, and the process ain't working. The process ain't working. Something ain't clicking. Something ain't clicking. You can't make it past the second round. Your teams are injury prone. You just have bad luck. I don't know what it is about the Sixers. I really don't, but they just have bad luck, and that's what it is. From Ben Simmons to Doc Rivers to washed up Paul George. That's just crazy. But you let me know down in the comment section down below, what do you think of the Sixers? Do you think that they'll bounce back next year, or do you think they'll it's already written on the wall for them? They're done. Like I said, this is one of the teams that could go from not the playoffs to making the playoffs and going on a run last year. Because like I said, on paper, this team is good. This team is really good. Jared McCain. They have Quentin Grimes, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George. You have a top 6. You might end up with a top 6 pick in the NBA draft. On paper, that's a good team, and that's a team that should be able to produce wins. But they have injury issues. Players don't show up when it's time to show up. They need to figure out the injury issues. They need to see if Paul George and Joel Embiid are going to be really healthy next year. And if they are, and they get a top 6 pick, Jared McCain comes back like he did, Quentin Grimes play like he did at the end of the season, and Maxey continues to ball, they could be a threat in the NBA. They could be a lethal threat, but it depends on them. Right now, Daryl Morey, this is a terrible move. Trading for Paul George and paying him and Embiid all this money. It looks terrible right now. But I'm going to give them one more year, and we're going to see how this plays out. But that's my thoughts on the Philadelphia 76ers. Just to summarize how I feel, they were disappointing this year. Of course, they had injuries, but Paul George didn't live up to his contract. Joel Embiid should not have played for Team USA, and they should not have paid him all that money either, because he knows he was hurt. He knows he's injury prone. He just shouldn't have did it. He should have took the whole offseason off. Players need to step up when it's needed. And if they play their cards right, people get rehabbed correctly, Jared McCain comes back swinging, they get that top 6 pick, they can be a threat next year. They legitimately can. But I just think it's frustrating as a Sixers fan to hear you talking about this rebuild, hear you talking about the process for all this years, and you have nothing to show for it. You have nothing to show for it. And you have nothing at all but disappointing year after disappointing year after disappointing year. And eventually the fans are going to get sick of it. You don't want to end up like Dallas. You do not want to end up like Dallas. You don't want to end up like Dallas, Philadelphia. But like I said, the Sixers on paper should be contending for a championship. Yet they had injury issues, and they had players who were not showing up and were not worth their money. And this was just a bad, awful year for the Sixers. So hopefully next year they have a good year. Hopefully Paul George bounces back for the Sixers. Embiid bounces back. McCain comes back swinging, and they just have a really good regular season. Like I said, you let me know your thoughts. That's just all for me, y'all. All right, y'all. Until next time, Steven Conner out. Peace.